and I hope this time my belly won't be too heavily featured.
Suck it in.
like Captain Kirk.
Absolutely.
Yeah, love it. Mark, thanks for having me here in your distillery.
Oh, thanks for coming, mate.
It's Waiheke Whisky, right? That's
correct.
That's you guys.
That's us, yeah. That's what it says on the packet. Waiheke Whisky.
Perfect. And yeah, I'm really thrilled to be here. You guys out there, wenn ihr Untertitel haben wollt, einfach unten Untertitel, automatisch Untertitel einstellen und dann auf automatische Übersetzung klicken, falls ihr nicht dem englischen Text folgen wollt oder könnt. I just explained the subtitle option because in Germany you can, on YouTube you can sort of do automatic subtitles.
Captions, yeah.
Exactly, and then they translate it and it's actually really good by now. So I kind of like to tell people to use that because the English-speaking content is not really the most watched content right now on our channel because our channel is a German-speaking channel. We're thinking about switching, having another one, second one, a worldwide one, but you know, we'll see. That's not why we're here. We're actually here to introduce you guys to Waiheke Whisky, and I'm really thrilled to listen to your stories and to kind of have the third New Zealand whiskey on our channel. It's really interesting. We're quite far off from anything else that would be associated with whiskey, like Scotland's far away, States quite far away as well. And I saw in the bar before I came here, it's a restaurant, a bar, beautiful site. I'll show you some pictures. I saw that you do something like a bourbon. And I'm really interested in that as well, but we'll come to that later. Tell us about maybe your story. How did you come to make whiskey here in New Zealand?
Well, the story of New Zealand whiskey is the first thing to say. I don't know how much you've talked to your viewers about New Zealand, but I mean, New Zealand was heavily populated by Scots and Irish, and a very, very large chunk of the Europeans who migrated here was lots of Dutch, Germans, but the Europeans predominantly English, Irish, and Scots. And so there was a traditional whiskey making culture very early on in New Zealand, and then with the departure of Seagram's, who shut down the last distillery in the South Island, it's been pretty quiet. We started up in 2008, hobbyist, and then started distilling in 2010. I'm a doc, I'm a surgeon. We do head and neck cancer reconstructive surgery, but my passion was whiskey. And the idea was, I've got 4 grandkids now, and as I got older, I wasn't able to do surgery all the time. I do a bit of teaching, but the idea would be then to maybe follow my passion and do something which I could do as I got older, and this is just sitting in it. This is the third distillery we've built.
The third?
Wow.
Okay.
So the first one was just in a little rented garage. And we built the first version of our geodesic stills that you can see here behind us.
Awesome still. I'll show you some pictures as well. This is a really interesting looking still. We're gonna go back to that one.
We're a traditional batch pot still single malt whiskey manufacturer. Is the bulk of what we make, but we're all geeks. We're definitely down the very, very geeky end of the spectrum. Everything you see in here has been designed, engineered, and largely built by ourselves. These are the first stills that we haven't built ourselves, but on our website you'll see plenty of our old ones. But Speyside Copperworks have taken our drawings and lovingly recreated them into what you can see here. But the whiskey journey has been one of discovery because, you know, New Zealand whiskey, New Zealand malts, fantastic organic barley, New Zealand peat, no one's been doing it. And so really it's a voyage of discovery for us. New Zealand wood, different climate. And then we started putting whiskies out. We put our first release out 2018 to the San Francisco Spirits, won a silver in the open category. And then from there, really, it's been gently testing the market with competitions. And then we launched our first 10-year anniversary, we launched our first whiskies to the market. And then with some tasting packs and slowly full-size bottles. But there's been no hurry for us. I mean, it's a bit of a passion project, and the idea is just to make great New Zealand whiskey. And luckily, the imperative, I've still got the day job so at the moment, so that's funding the machine, and then slowly we'll get out of the day job and more into the whiskey over time.
Okay, so basically it's a bit like you're slowly building up the distillery while simultaneously working at your daytime job.
That's right.
That sounds like a lot of work.
I have a full-time distiller who works for me, luckily, who makes the whiskey. So, but it's really more. We wanted to touch every single part of this, from the still design all the way through to the engineering that runs this. We're very heavily invested into sustainable resource. We're lucky. New Zealand's 80% renewable energy anyway.
Okay.
And we have electric-fired steam boilers. These are all fully electric, carbon zero distillery. So the electricity comes from geothermal power.
Cool.
We have our own bore on site. So our water comes from about 120 meters deep from the Coromandel aquifer, which directly comes from Antarctica. Comes straight up. There's no filtration needed. Essentially, just a particle filter. It's excellent water for brewing and distilling. And we recycle all our water on site, so we have our own water treatment plant. So we close the loop.
Just to get that straight, because maybe you might have missed that in the brief swooshing by of the English language in that case. Just to understand it right, your energy actually comes from geothermal, like the heat from the earth. That fires steam turbines that generate electricity. Wow, that's awesome.
And electricity is from a company called Prime Energy. And we buy the electricity from them, 100% renewable electricity.
I mean, that makes so much sense. Since I've been here, I've actually got a lot into sustainability and this kind of issues. But I show you guys some pictures of the geothermal pools where you can literally see steam rising from lakes, and for us Europeans that's very strange, but very interesting to see here. But it makes so much sense when you have all this natural heat to translate it into energy. So it makes so much sense to do that. Yeah,
and so we've closed the loop with a German company actually has created the very first what we call a high temperature heat pump. So we can take our condensing water and take that back at about 6 degrees and then compress that and take that back up to around about 130 degrees steam, massively increasing our coefficient of energy. So the whole loop's closed. Everything from recycling water, taking our water on site. The process energy, everything is renewable.
That is amazing. Wow, that's really interesting. But it makes so much sense in terms of the natural resources you guys have here with the geothermal pools and I don't really know how to say it in English, but you have basically lava running beneath your country. So it's actually quite.
That's a good and a bad thing.
I know.
We have a lot of active volcanoes, as you may have noticed, and Auckland sits on. A lot of dormant volcanoes. If you look out the window, you can see one right behind us. But and we're only about 100 yards from the sea here. So about 100 meters from the sea. And just off the coast is an actually actively exploding volcano at the moment, White Island. So we're very close to geothermal power. And it makes sense to reuse all that in making the whiskey.
Not just waiting for it to explode.
No, hopefully it doesn't do that so soon. But I mean, you might be saying, well, what's so special about New Zealand? Why make whiskey in New Zealand? But I mean, again, we make traditional single malt style whiskey, although we do obviously make bourbon and a few other things, but bourbon style, I should say. But we have a very different type of barley here. And we're a peated distillery predominantly.
Interesting.
So we have New Zealand peat, and around about 10% of the country's covered in peat.
Okay.
So New Zealand peat is the thing that lights our fire. That's what we're interested in. Because it's very, very different than Isle peat or Irish peat. It's a sum product of all those different flora and fauna that have fallen down. And of course, our trees are resinous. They they're very, very different. As you may have noticed, that the flora that you see around you, the trees are a lot more subtropical here, as you're sweating away in the humidity here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just melting basically.
And it's not even that hot at the moment, but most people, when they think of New Zealand, they might think of mountains, glaciers, sheep, a lot of sheep. But that's really the South Island. The North Island is semi-tropical, Auckland, we're about the same latitude as Barcelona here. It's hot and humid, and a very, very different environment for making whiskey. Actually, a fantastic environment for making whiskey, particularly for aging whiskey. And so we've got this fantastic water, we've got this fantastic organic barley, we've got our own peat, which is sustainable. We use a wetland peat, which is a bog or a swamp rested out peat, and gives a very gentle, as you'll see when you taste some, gives you a nice gentle mellow smoke. So even though we can get up to about 40 ppm phenols at Port Charlotte, we certainly aren't anywhere near the Lefroy or Lagavulin style of peatiness yet. We're trying. We're not going to do a Jim McEwen and get an Optimal or something like that going, but I do think that what's exciting about New Zealand whiskey is really, it's a bit like a parallel universe. It's a dark mirror, black mirror. We're very similar, as you can see around you. It's a bit like the UK, but it's not really. I mean, you speak the same language. It looks vaguely familiar, but it's a parallel universe, and everything's different.
That's a very good
so that's what's so exciting about what we're doing, is that we can create single malts that are quite similar, but as we said, like your Star Trek reference, it's single malt, but not as you know it, Jim. It's a little bit different.
I'm very curious. To be honest, ever since I traveled New Zealand, I have not tasted one whiskey because I had a really bad cold in the beginning. People know that saw the first video with Thompson. And so I haven't actually tried anything. Today I will change that, and hopefully I'll get you guys some reviews soon, anytime soon. We will do Thompson Pocono whiskey reviews, obviously, and I'll definitely try to get some whiskey on camera for you guys from Waiheke, obviously. Speaking of Waiheke, just to let people know, where are we right now? What is our location? Because I'm not really sure if we actually pinned it down, because we're actually on an island right now.
Yeah, so we're on Waiheke. Sounds almost Hawaiian, and there's a lot of similarities between here and Hawaii, but particularly in the indigenous language and the volcanic scenery that's around you. So we're around about a 30-minute ferry ride from downtown Auckland, which is a city of about 1.7 million, very cosmopolitan city, very sort of Asia-centric city. So we're really in Oceania here, which is Southeast Asia, the Pacific Islands. So there's a large Pacific Island Maori population, Cook Islands, think Tonga, Fiji. Then you've got a lot of Southeast Asians, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, big population. And then you've got the European population too. And the island itself is around about 10,000 residents. It has a city side, which is a little bit more mellow, and then a stormy, sort of more rough, surfy, I should say, rather stormy, surfy sort of northern side, golden sandy beaches. And there's about 30 odd vineyards on it, so it's a wine growing region, which is great for us because there's a lot of spare oak barrels.
Awesome,
which is fantastic. So we've got a lot of winemaking knowledge, which is really, really useful. In fact, our head distiller was a winemaker for many years for Mudbrick Vineyard, very famous vineyard on the island. And he brings this knowledge of fermentation skills, and he has a superb palate to whiskey making. He brings a delicacy and an attention to detail to whiskey making, which is really interesting. And he uses words like bouquet, which you never usually hear when you're describing a whiskey, but you know what he means. And certainly his knowledge of yeasts and his knowledge of fermentation is second to none. So it's quite interesting. We've got this really disparate group of engineers. I'm a doctor, my business partner's a beekeeper, a winemaker, And so we've put these guys together, and Denny, who's the brains of the outfit, is a brewer, an ex-brewer for one of the biggest breweries in the country, Lion Nathan, and he created a lot of famous beers. And he's been helping us with our brew house side of things for the distillery as well. So it's a real collective, fun bunch of guys getting together to create something special.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds really interesting. Can't wait to try it. So, are you planning to keep it local, or are you planning to build a brand and spread it, and you have already countries to export? Or?
That's a great question. I mean, so up till now, we've only been producing whiskey relatively small volumes, barrel a week. Although we've been going for 10 years, we've got quite a good inventory of whiskey. But it's been an experimentation phase, really sussing out, because no one really knew what New Zealand peat does, what New Zealand barley does, what New Zealand wood does in this temperature, in this climate, in this water. And so the last 10 years, we've really been messing around, having fun, creating whiskies to decide our profile and what it is we want to release.
Cool.
The exciting thing, as I said, is New Zealand peat. So that's where we've gone. Although, maybe 10% of New Zealanders are peat drinkers, our peat is very mellow, as you'll find out. And so hopefully we can convert a lot of those non-peat drinkers into peat heads over time. So we've finally, after all these years, gotten around to actually producing bottles of whiskey. But again, with our own level of geekiness involved, so recycled cardboard. For those of you familiar with whiskey bottles, this is about as light. This is recycled glass, which is not traditionally used. It's about as light as you can make a whiskey bottle. It's about 410 grams, so you don't have any big heavy punts, there's no thick glass. The idea is to make something lightweight, recyclable, that you can ship around the planet without.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The other thing we've done is we've gone for a screw cap. So I don't know if any of your viewers are into New Zealand wine, but it's very famously started with this concept of the screw cap instead of the cork. And in the homage to New Zealand wine and also practicality, we have a screw cap on the top of our bottles. So it's recycled PTFE.
Cool.
But we know for a low volume producer, we know the product's going to arrive in good quality. Yeah. We can reuse the bottle, we can reuse the cap.
Smells good.
So this is something that we've really spent some time thinking about.
Yeah.
And the idea, we've even eliminated the little aluminium bit out of the top. So we've gone trying to make these out of recycled plastic.
Yeah, cool.
So every little bit of the journey, the fun part of the journey has been how do we reinvent this thing, which is whiskey, because we have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Because we're not Scotland, we've got no traditions.
Yeah.
There's no tradition of New Zealand whiskey making. We're it.
Yeah.
So we're forging this new frontier of well, if we're going to make a whiskey, and with my I've got 5 kids and 4 grandkids, then we need to make something pretty sustainable for the future and that we can be proud of. So this is what we've done.
Awesome. So basically, we're standing. I'll show you some pictures. We're standing in a distillery is basically still in the making, sort of. Yeah. You use this equipment that's around us?
No, this is our brand new distillery.
Yeah.
We're having a sneak preview. We're not open yet.
Yeah.
We started this new distillery August last year. Poured the slab. This is a custom-built distillery with 100% closed-loop recyclable activity.
Cool.
With heat reclamation. And even the condensers outside the building to get the cold. Yeah. So that way south, that's Antarctica that way. And so when the wind blows from that way, it's cold. Yeah. And when the wind blows from that way, it's warm.
Yeah. Awesome.
So the condensers are facing that way deliberately to get cooling from the southerly winds, and they're outside the building, so that helps us with a little extra bit of cooling. I mean, essentially it's a traditional distillery. The things that are different, you'll notice in the corner we have a Czechoslovakian PSS brew house, 4-vessel brew house, with a separate mash tun and a separate lauter tun. So no combi tun, 4,000 litre mash tun. Because of our brewing background, we really wanted to create something really special in the form of our wash. So we have the ability both to make beer here, but also to make a really, really high-end wash.
Awesome.
And we think there's a few stages I think that get ignored. A lot of people say, the vast majority of the flavor and aging comes from the barrel or it's distilled, but we think it really starts at the mash tun and works its way all the way through.
Yeah.
So for us, we think Czechs make great beer and we think they make great gear. So we actually bought that secondhand brew house and have stripped it back and reconverted it to our purposes. New Zealand's a long, long way away, as you said at the start, from anywhere. So it's expensive to get good quality gear. A lot of it's made in China and unfortunately isn't as great quality as it could be.
Yeah.
So this Czechoslovakian brew house we've got here is really, I'm very proud of it. But it's something which we've taken and given a little bit of a tweak towards making whiskey. And I'm sure you'll show some photos of it later. But the idea is quite different in as much as that we have a separate mashing process and a separate lautering process, which is very traditional for making beer, but it hasn't really worked its way into whiskey production yet. And so the combi tuns, which are familiar to most people, which do mash and lautering at the same time, this takes that process and separates it out for higher efficiency.
Cool. All right, you can guide us a bit through your current range. What are you, because the thing is, you said you had built 3 distilleries, so I think that the whiskey you have right now is probably from the first and the second one.
Correct.
This is we're sitting in the third one.
Correct.
In the new Waiheke whiskey distillery that's to come. So that means you have whiskey that has been produced by the last distilleries you built, but you have a current range.
Yeah.
And obviously there's plenty more to come.
Yeah.
So you can maybe talk us through your plans and what you're actually having on.
Well, I mean, I think, so as I said before, like our whiskies to date have been relatively experimental. They definitely have the DNA that runs through them, both with the geodesic still, which is, so one of the guys I started the business with is an engineer, and we really wanted to have a little look at the pot still and why it was that shape and what was going on with it. And being an engineer, he was like, well, why is it that shape? And we said, well, we want to maximize copper contact and we want a bit of reflux. And he's like, well, why don't you make it a pyramid shape? That's the maximum surface area to volume ratio of any shape.
Okay.
We're like, well, there aren't that many pyramid shapes, still not very practical. And he was like, well, why don't you make it a geodesic? And so what we've tried to do with our spirit still, this is the spirit still on this side, is increase our surface area to volume ratio with these geodesic panels. And we were very interested to see what that would do to our whiskey and our peated whiskey. We messed around with making this the wash still and our non-geodesic on the spirit still and vice versa. But what we found was this is a very great way of controlling our spirit, particularly the spirit run. So once we've done our wash run, we're controlling the spirit run. And over time, the geodesic theme really has been something that's both a bit of a marketing tool, but also, it really does make a difference. And if we do both runs in our non-geodesic, this gives us a very, very beautiful, clean spirit. So we messed around with non-peated whiskey because we couldn't initially, when we started, get peated New Zealand malt. Yeah. All the peated malt was coming in from Inverness, and so it wasn't until about 8 years ago that we could actually get a New Zealand peated malt. So our very earliest experimentations in New Zealand malts were all non-peated, and mostly in wine barrels because that's what we've got on the island. So we'd retoast our wine barrels, and then over time, so some of our oldest whiskey is single cask from back in those days, like our Cantankerous, for example, which is 9 years old. But as we've progressed through our range, our more recent releases have been repeated. We generally don't tend to release anything under 5 years. Well, we haven't released anything under 5 years as our youngest. As I'm sure you've heard before in New Zealand, and the same as Balcones and Texas and India, our angel share is ridiculous. I mean, we're getting up to 8, 9, 10% angel share, and our whiskey age is very, very fast. Our 10-year-old barrels are sort of half empty. Yeah. There's never going to be a 20-year-old wanky whiskey. There's going to be nothing left. It's all evaporated away. Yeah. But I mean, our 5-year-olds drink well. That's our entry range. We have a peated and non-peated. So we separated the range into peated and non-peated core range, we have our sherry finish, our wine barrel finishes, and then our single casks.
Cool.
So traditional, we don't want to be too out there, so it's a pretty traditional way of releasing a range. Our wine barrel casks and our sherry casks can be peated or non-peated depending on the expression we're releasing. So we'll take you through that, but essentially Sweetwater is our non-peated, the Moss is our peated core ranges. They're just an easy drinking sort of breakfast whiskey, if you like. Our Ceres range, which is Arabic for Jerez, which is where whiskey's made, and there's a great story behind that, is our sherry cask range.
Where sherry is made.
Yeah.
Okay, you just said where whiskey is made.
Oh, I do beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Sorry,
but yeah,
cut that out.
I kind of got it in my brain. I was like, wait, I understood what you were saying, and then I realized you said whiskey. Sherry is made in Spain.
Ceres is Arabic name for Jerez, where sherry's from.
Cool.
And that formed this as part of the map of Al-Aldrisi. So you should look up the history of that. It's fascinating history of the word Ceres, because we use Australian sherry barrels. So one of the beautiful things is we have a lot of port and sherry that comes from this part of the world. We don't need to ship empty barrels halfway around from Europe and small distillers like us are not going to get great barrels out of the bodegas in Spain. So we turn to Australian sherry, but they make fantastic fortified wines.
Yeah.
Port, slightly harder, so we just released a port finish for Dramfest, peated port. So for that we had to make our own port. So luckily we have a winemaker, so we made our own port 5 years ago. With the proviso we can get free port barrels, so we got the barrels back and finished the peat in there. So a lot of it's homegrown, a lot of experimentation. But this distillery will make 3 barrels of whiskey a day. So we're now up to 1,200 bottles a day of whiskey. So we're really switching into overdrive.
Yeah.
So really, essentially, a core range of lightly peated to heavy peated whiskies, finished in a combination of wine and fortified wine barrels, with a core bourbon heart to it.
Sounds very interesting. I initially heard the word peated port because that's usually one of my absolute favorite kind of whiskies. Like Lafroig Brodier was one of my favorites. Glenglassaugh did a fantastic peated port. So when I heard peated port, I was like,
well, we're going to taste some of them.
Interesting. It's like, and I'm definitely interested in the. Can you quickly say something about the bourbon you made? Because obviously you can't really call it a bourbon because it's not made in America.
Yeah.
But I saw that you make in like not brackets, but how do you say it in English when you do this?
When you do that? Yeah, inverted commas. Quotes.
Yeah, cool.
So, or a woven, a Waiheke bourbon. I mean, so we make we wanted to play around with some New Zealand grain. And I mean, grain whiskey is actually quite hard for pot still batch distillation.
Okay.
Because to make a grain mash is tricky. I mean, you're using endogenous enzymes out of the barley to activate. You've got to get your levels right. We ended up making a 51% corn, 28% rye. So relatively high rye, bourbon style, I'll call it, whiskey, which we aged in Jack Daniel's barrels from Tennessee, which are first fills. We tried some in New Oak for our own New Oak here, but the level of char, we just didn't get it.
Okay.
So we tried some of our own SDR American oak wine barrels, which we've recharred as well. And so what we sell now is a bit of a blend of recharred, heavy char, like an alligator, like a level 3 char, STR wine barrels with a bit of JD Jack Daniel's barrels, first fills. And it's, well, you'll see what you think. And also we use from our farm here, we have Manuka honey, which is the very famous New Zealand medicinal honey. And a lot of the wine barrels, if they've been sulfured or have had wine and been empty for a while, we like to sterilize them. And so we use the Manuka honey. So we make a solution of the Manuka honey and we use that, it's got a high phenol content. We use that to sterilize the barrels. and then we'll just give them a quick rinse, and the bourbon goes in there, and that gives us our honey bourbon.
Oh, cool.
So just a bit of a hint of honey in there, a bit of sweetness and a little bit of honey. Yeah. So a honey, we call it Waiheke whiskey honey, and Waiheke whiskey high rye, American style whiskey.
Awesome. Interesting. Yeah, that's really like,
it's fun. It's not going to be released on the market as yet, but watch the space. Unfortunately, when you set out to make single malt whiskey, there's a lot of people that love their bourbons, and so it's a great seller in the bar. So who knows, we might end up releasing it.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, the last thing for me to say basically is, since most people that will watch this are probably German, I mean, we do an English interview, so in theory, people from all over the world could watch this, but it's probably hard for the German viewers to watch this and not be able to drink your stuff right now. Maybe in the future, hopefully you'll get somebody to import that. We can talk about that afterwards, off camera. But yeah, really interesting. I'm very happy that I have the possibility to try something. I'll try to share that experience with you guys later. And yeah, thank you so much. That was a really nerdy kind of interview. Love it, really love it. Like, we are very happy to have any kind of deep dive whiskey conversations. And you can really feel that you're very passionate about what you're doing. And yeah, you can see it's a serious project. So there's another great brand of New Zealand whiskey on the horizon. Whenever you are in New Zealand, come over to Waiheke and visit the distillery and grab some food at the restaurant. Yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
That was a pleasure.
Great. And yeah, now we'll have a drink and
Thanks, guys.
some food. Thank you so much.
Bye now.